On November 9, two men stood before President William Ruto to deliver a long-awaited speech separately by just a few hours and a few kilometers. They were both live on television. Both men are sworn Pan-Africanists and both were after the heart of a nation weighed down by heavy economic burdens. But that's where the similarities ended. One man, President William Ruto, wore a blue suit. The other man, South African opposition leader Julius Malema, was clad in a black safari suit with his customary red beret perched on his head. While the President State of the Nation address delivery amid pomp and ceremony in Parliament was received with sombre and where look every other sentence of Mr. Malema's explosive speech was met with wild cheers from his audience during the launch of the Pan-African Institute at a Kenya university. Since that day, the two men and their speeches have been the center of much comparison and plenty of lively debate in Kenya. Mr. Malema's speech was rebroadcast by a number of Kenyan digital channels and clips of it were shared widely on social media. Mr. Malema's decision to attack President Ruto on a number of issues, including a failure to deliver on his election promises, hit the spot with many Kenyans. The South African firebrand also condemned Mr. Ruto for not challenging King Charles on colonialism during his recent visit to Kenya, as well as his support for Israel in the current conflict with Hamas. Julius Malema said this was the day angry citizens from 4 African countries took their street simultaneous demonstration to fight the high cost of living. The protesters in South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, and Tunisia were led by opposition leader Professor Paul Lumumba, chair of the new Pan-African Institute that invited Mr. Malema to Kenya, echoes Mr. Ndekwe's argument. Malema represented a young generation of Africans who are now beginning to articulate Pan-African issues in a manner that appeal to critical masses. Remember, this is a very young continent, he said, adding that Africa needs a young generation of leaders. It was said by Paul Lumumba. Although Mr. Ruto, who was 58, campaigned last year as the candidate of the next generation against 70 years old opposition leader Raila Odinga at 42, Mr. Malema is better placed to articulate the concern of that large cohort of young votes. But even before the 4 countries demonstrating in March, Mr. Malema was a well-known figure with a sizable following in Kenya, mainly rising from his heightened contribution in the South African Parliament, where his economic freedom fighters are known for wearing red overall, giving fair speech and occasionally disrupting proceedings. Comparison of his comments in Parliament are popular and have been doing the round in Kenya. In the comment section of one such video last year, one person wrote, "Still can't get enough of Honorable Malema. Love you, ambassador of pure truth. Love from Kenya." So when Malema landed in Kenya, he found an audience is waiting. Mr. Ndakwe said that Mr. Malema represents a challenge not just for President Ruto, but also for his rivals. For some Kenyans, Malema symbolizes the opposition leader they do not have, and many make comparisons with Raila Odinga. Malema is young, energetic, bold, and fearless. He speaks his mind even though it may annoy others. The young people don't see these qualities in Raila. When the President State of the Nation address, Mayor repeated the same promises the government has made before. No one questioned it. Agree one senior editor in Kenya who did not want to use his name. Malema gave an alternative voice, castigating the government its welcome break from the usual talk. Unsurprisingly, Kenya government has reacted angrily to Malema's comment, and Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua has given him this advice. We didn't like to appeal to visitors to respect the leader of their host countries. We travel overseas and we don't insult the leader of these countries. We don't interfere with their politics. This man who came here is all-knowing. By the afternoon, he seemed to know more about Kenya than us. I visited his own country in December and they ration electricity for 7 hours. Yet we don't discuss this because we respect them. The government is not alone in its reaction. Many ordinary Kenyans have found his comment distasteful, saying a foreigner should not teach them how to run their affairs. Others often offended with his decision to give his critical speech on the same day as the President's State of the Nation address. Giving them many fears he has referred in one short visit. Why did the organizers of the new Pan-African Institute invite Mr. Malema to Kenya? The choice was defined by some fundamental things, said Professor Lumumba, a well-known and deeply passionate Pan-Africanist. One is that Malema has spoken and continues to speak boldly about issues that concern the continent of Africa, including unhindering trade in Africa, free movement of people within Africa, and having Africa take charge of their affairs. Malema in South Africa also represents a generation that is saying, even when you say we have killed apartheid, apartheid is still alive and well. And that to me resonates with us. He is also courageous and says these things without fear of consequence. Many of us minds our weight because we fear the consequence. So why does Pro Lumumba think that so many Kenyans embraced Mr. Malema? There is a silent critical majority of Kenyans who feel let down by what is happening and what has been happening in Kenya political arena, because Kenyans in the public arena are generally hypocritical. They don't say what they mean. So there is a sense in which Malema as a visitor came and said the things that we want to say, but we don't want to say them. And what did Malema himself make of his visit? He told Professor Lumumba, I'm very happy that I have a group of Kenyan and extension Africans who are beginning to embrace the agenda of Africa and doing it for themselves and beginning to recognize that ultimate decolonization, ultimate freedom is economic freedom. Despite many Kenyans' embrace of Mr. Malema, back home in South Africa, he is a controversial figure who has faced the occasion of stirring racial tension. He has been repeatedly accused of hate speech, and opinion polls which show his EFF training a distant third nationwide with the support of about 13% of voters. With the men in the red beret having left Kenya, the blue-suited president had the tough task of winning back this, looking for solution to their economic and political problem from without instead of from within.